wanted to be short, and it was. Very good. Thank you, Sharon. Please rise for our call to worship, which is put in the bulletin this morning. Whom do you seek here in this place?
We seek God, the Creator, who brought us to life.
Who has told you of God?
Jesus Christ has shown us the love of God through his life.
Discipleship is difficult. Are you ready?
We strive to be ready. Let our worship begin.
Please remain standing as we sing our opening hymn this morning, Awesome God, found on page 179 of your hymn. Lord, have mercy on me, for I am a sinner. Amen. Friends, hear and proclaim the good news.
In Jesus Christ we are forgiven. Thanks be to God.
Please join with me now in the prayer of illumination, which you find printed in the bulletin this morning. Shall we pray? Lord, open our hearts and minds, that as the Scriptures are read and the Word proclaimed, we may hear with joy what you say to us today. Amen. Our New Testament Scripture reading and our only Scripture reading this morning is taken from the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter, the first 6 verses, which is found on page 1050 of your pew Bibles, if you want to read along. Listen now to this word. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old received divine approval. By faith we understand that the world was created by the Word of God, so that what is seen was made out of things which do not appear. By faith Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he received approval as righteous, God bearing witness by accepting his gifts he died, but through his faith he is still speaking. By faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, he was attested as having pleased God. And without faith it is impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. This is the word of our Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Shall we pray? Gracious God, may the words of my lips and the meditations of our hearts and minds be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The 11th chapter of Hebrews, a lot of very well-known passages there. It's probably one of the best-known passages in the Bible, the entire chapter. And this beginning element that is described here by the author of Hebrews, of course, is the quality of faith. It's what makes faith, that is what makes Christians different from the non-Christian. That rather eccentric philosopher, I guess you could say, and nature lover from the last century, Henry David Thoreau, once said, and I quote, "If I seem to walk out of step with others, it is because I am listening to another drumbeat." End quote. And I think that's a pretty good description of faith. Christians walk as though we're listening to a little different drumbeat than those who are non-Christians. This chapter really centers on, it focuses on what faith is. And as a Christian, I believe that this word faith is greatly misunderstood, and that there are many peculiar ideas of what faith really is all about. So first of all, I just want to mention a few things about what faith is not. And then we'll get into what this chapter really says faith is. Faith is not positive thinking. That is something that's quite different than faith. Positive thinking is a good thing, but that's not faith. Faith is not some hunch that you're following. We do that quite often in our lives, but that is not faith. Faith is not just hoping for the best, hoping that everything will turn out all right. No, that's not faith. Faith is not just some feeling of optimism. As a matter of fact, some of the worst times in your life is when your faith really needs to shine through. Faith is none of those things, though quite often we identify each of those items as a part of our faith. But that's not truly what faith is all about. So then hopefully by this point you're saying, well then, Pastor Steve, what is faith? What is it? You know, how can we describe it? And that's what chapter 11, the first part, these first 6 verses of chapter 11 tries to do for us. And you've got to remember that the author of Hebrews here is not just describing faith in general, the general term faith, but he's talking about faith in God. You can have faith in a lot of different things, but we're talking about faith in God, the Father Almighty. And as Christians, of course, that's important. It's perhaps the most important part of who we are, that having faith in God. So I think it's important that we know what it is. So the next couple of minutes, I want to try to explain, or at least elaborate, on what Hebrews is telling us here. And as I read in those first two verses, it says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old received divine approval. Without faith it is impossible to please God. This is from the 6th verse, the last verse I read. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that God exists. That makes sense. Note that these verses, the first and second verse and the 6th verse, they all begin their description of faith with the idea of hope. Hope. Faith begins with things hoped for. That is, it starts with this sense of discontent, that there has to be more hope in the future than we're presently experiencing right now. It seems to indicate that you can never have much faith unless you're sort of dissatisfied with your life as it is right now, the way that things are going right now. You've got to be longing for something better than what you can see and what you can experience right now. That's the first note of faith, according to Hebrews. If you don't feel somehow dissatisfied with how the world is or what your life is like, then it's impossible for you to exercise much faith at all. You have to look around and realize things could be better. Life could be better. Not just for me, but for all people. That's an essential part of faith. And I think that is why all throughout the Bible, the great enemy of faith in the Bible is a complacent spirit. A complacent spirit. An attitude of self-satisfaction with the status quo. If you're completely satisfied with the way everything is, that's the complete opposite of where faith begins. You have to look around and decide things could be better. That's the beginning point of faith. If you're dissatisfied, you're looking for something better. If you're not content to be merely a cultured animal living out a life of eating, sleeping, and amusing yourself and eventually dying, then you're in a position to exercise faith. Perhaps there are many who would like to have faith, but who are never really ready for it because they're not dissatisfied. They don't believe life could be better. They don't believe that conditions could improve for themselves or for their fellow man. It seems ironic because most of us do want more. We want better in our lives. We want, regardless of what we have or where we are, we do seem to strive for more. We're looking for something better. That's okay, because that's the first note of faith. Verse 6 puts it, he who would draw near to God. And if you're really looking for that opportunity to draw nearer to God, you're hoping for something better in your life. You're hoping to become nearer to God. That's the beginning of faith. That is looking for more of life than is visible on the surface. Such a one is not satisfied to have life all surface, all length and breadth, but no depth to life. We want to find something to deepen life. And that's the first note of faith. Then comes the second thing the author of Hebrews says, the conviction of things not seen. Not only a desire for something better, but awareness of something else. That is faith. It means that we become aware of the fact that we're surrounded by really an invisible spirit kingdom that exists. That we can see is not the whole explanation of everything that there is in this world or in this life. There are realities that cannot be seen, that cannot be weighed, that cannot be measured, that cannot be analyzed, that cannot even be touched, and yet which are as real and as vital as anything that we can see or touch. In fact, maybe they're even more real because they are the explanation of the things that we can see. We must understand that there is a spiritual existence that is a part of this world, that is a part of who and what we are. This is so beautifully seen in the words and the teachings of Jesus Christ. He speaks of God the Father as though he were standing right there with him, invisible and yet present. He speaks of the world as a great family home in which there is a father with a father's heart welcoming us. He does not see the universe as an impersonal machine grinding and clanking along as science does, but he sees it as an invisible but very real spiritual existence. And verse 6 says the same thing. He that comes to God must believe that God is, that God exists. There are some who say, well, that's the hard part. That's what's difficult. Believing that God exists. But really it's not. It's not that difficult. The easiest thing in the world to do is believe that God exists. It requires a lot of effort to disbelieve that God things that they don't understand and that they don't know that exist in this world. A baby and a young child has no problem at all believing in God, that a God exists, because they don't understand much of their world at all. And they know that there are outside forces at work and that make things happen and that they come about. They have no problem at all believing in the concept, the idea of God in their world. It's only as we become older and we acquire all this baggage, all this knowledge that we begin to put into our heads, into our minds, that we begin to question the existence of God. With young children, there's no question at all of the existence of God in their mind. It's easy to believe that God exists. You have to work at it, come up with explanations and reasonings and whys, and trying to put X's and O's together to really come up with some explanation of why God might not exist. The idea that God exists is planted early on in all of us. And we have to work to get that idea out of our heads, whether it be an atheist or whether it be an agnostic or wherever. We really have to work at an explanation as to why there is no God. And the reason it's so much work is, as we know, because God does exist. And you really have to go to great lengths to try to explain the fact that there is no God, because that explanation is always going to be kind of convoluted in some way. The concept of God ought to be one of the most difficult things, you think, for children to grasp, since God can't be seen. But the amazing thing is, children have no difficulty at all in believing that God exists. So why do we? It requires long and careful effort to train the mind to reject this evidence and explain it on other terms. The third ingredient of faith, the last one that I'll talk about this morning, that the author of Hebrews mentions, is the assurance of things hoped for. Faith is the assurance that the things hoped for, the things you're longing to have, the better man or woman that you would like to be, will be achieved by acting on the revelation of the things unseen. Acting on the revelation of the power and the grace of God, which cannot be seen. So let me put it all together as I end here this morning. Faith begins with a longing for something better in life, and an awareness that within this universe there is something else. There is more. And that something or someone else has actually revealed itself to us. And we can have knowledge of it. And as we act on that revelation that there is something else, we will achieve those things hoped for, the something better in life. And that is the story that is given to us throughout the entire 11th chapter of Hebrews. I just began to touch on it. But what Hebrews 11 does, it goes through a historical rendering of several people of faith and the things that happened to them, the amazing things that happened to them in their lifetime. But you know, your or I's name could be added to that list, and the amazing things that happen to us because of God's intervention in our lives as well. And that's what faith is all about. As we act on the revelation that God does exist, we then achieve those things hoped for, that something better in life. That's the story of faith. That's the story, really, of the entire Bible. And you know, it works for anyone. It works for all of us, this faith. If only we can grab hold of it and realize that we work our lives through faith, and God then will provide. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let us respond to our message this morning by rising, either in body or in own spirit and singing our hymn of response, which is hymn number 219, Surely the Presence. Let's rise now and sing. And if you can believe what you just sang, you have faith that the presence of the Lord is in this place. You may be seated. We now come to that point in our service where we now have an opportunity to give back for the many ways in which we have been blessed. So as Amy comes forward to collect our offerings, please be generous in your giving this morning. You may be seated. Let us pray. Oh God, we are truly blessed, and out of our blessings we offer these tokens this day. May they be used to further your kingdom throughout this world. Almighty and all-powerful God, on a day filled with sunshine, our souls are cheered and our thoughts turn to you. We give you thanks for this day, for the sunshine, for the warmth of a friend's smile, for a gentle touch, for the assurance that your love is here. That is faith, and we thank you, gracious God. And yet, in the midst of our joy, we remember so many who are in need this day. We ask that you be with all of those who are hungry and need food. And we give you thanks for the opportunity to reach out and to share some food with them through this program. We ask that you be with those who suffer from illness or disease, those who suffer from the ravages of war or oppression or violence in any form, those who have recently lost loved ones, those who have departed from our presence and who are missing us just as we are missing them. There are so many, who are in need, our God. So we ask this day that some measure of your love and grace be extended to all those in need, whether mentioned by name in this service or whether they remain unnamed but are in our thoughts and prayers. May they all know the comfort of your redeeming grace. Be with us now as together we repeat the prayer Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Let us now rise one last time, either in body or in spirit, and sing together our closing hymn, This is the Day, number 209. Shall we rise and sing? This and every day is the day that the Lord has made, and we need to remember each and every day that fact, that the Lord created this day for us to live, for us to rejoice, and for us to honor and worship Him. So you did the right thing this morning by being right here early this morning, worshiping God for a few minutes before we go on to the rest of our day. And I hope the rest of this week treats you as well as this morning, that you have a great week, and always remember, regardless of where you are and what you're doing right before school starts. When does your school start, by the way? Tomorrow. You start tomorrow. So you've already started working. Oh, you have. Oh, you go back tomorrow. Okay. Yeah.
She has honors classes also.
Oh, yeah. No, that's all right. That's different than regular school. So anyway, okay. Well, I hope you have a great week, and I hope that you remember that God is always right there with you, because God is always above us. God is always below us. God always goes behind us. God always goes before us. God always stands right beside us. And most importantly of all, God is always inside us as well. And remembering that, my friends, is faith. Go in peace this day. Amen.